The pocket watch felt heavier in my hands than it should have. I'd had it engraved just that morning, to Dad, my first dance partner. Love, Mason, the script elegant against the silver surface. My fingers traced the words as I sat across from him in his home office, surrounded by the mahogany furniture and legal awards that had always made this room feel more like a courtroom than a place for family conversations. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. The drive over here, I'd practiced the words in my car, imagining his face lighting up when I asked. 31 years old, and I was still seeking that spark of pride in his eyes, still hoping this would be the moment he'd see me as his daughter worth celebrating. Dad, I wanted to ask you something important. My voice came out steadier than I felt. The afternoon sun slanted through his office windows, casting long shadows across the Persian rug where I'd played as a child while he worked, always quietly, always trying not to disturb the important man behind the big desk. He didn't look up from his laptop immediately. The clicking of keys continued for another few seconds, each tap feeling like a small rejection. Finally, he raised his eyes, that familiar expression of mild irritation crossing his features, the same look he'd given me when I'd interrupted his work to show him report cards, art projects, college acceptance letters. Mason, you know I'm busy. What's this about? I held out the watch, my heart hammering against my ribs. I got this for you, for the wedding I know we've never been. I mean, I've always hoped that when this day came, you'd be there to give me away. Richard Lewis took the watch with the same detached efficiency he used to sign legal documents. He barely glanced at the engraving before setting it aside on his desk like it was just another piece of mail. The casual dismissal of something I'd spent an hour choosing stung more than I'd expected. Your wedding is in June, right? The 15th? Yes, Dad. June 15th. I sent you the save the date months ago, and Mom confirmed you both were coming. I tried to keep the desperation out of my voice, but I could hear it creeping in around the edges. He leaned back in his leather chair, already shaking his head. Mason, I'm sorry, but Victoria needs me that week. She's going through a difficult time with her divorce, and I promised to take her to Hawaii. She specifically requested that week, said it was the only time she could get away from work. The words hit me like cold water. This was the pattern, wasn't it? Victoria's needs always came first, had always come first, would always come first. I'd been foolish to think my wedding day might be different. But Dad, it's my wedding day. I understand that, sweetheart, but Victoria is really struggling right now. She needs her father. You're getting married to Christopher, you'll have him. Victoria doesn't have anyone else. He said it so matter-of-factly, as if the logic was obvious, as if I should be grateful for his practical assessment of our respective needs. I felt something shift inside my chest, a familiar ache that I'd carried for 31 years suddenly sharpening into clarity. I need my father too. Mason, be reasonable. You're the capable one. You always have been. You can handle this. Victoria can't handle being alone right now, and frankly, your wedding will be beautiful whether I'm there or not. You don't really need me. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the ticking of his antique clock. I stared at the pocket watch on his desk, the engraving facing down now, hidden against the dark wood like a secret shame. I've needed you my whole life, Dad. He sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. Don't be dramatic, Mason. You turned out fine without much help from me. Look at you, successful career, nice fiancé, beautiful wedding planned. Victoria needs more support. She always has. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. So that's it. You're choosing Hawaii with Victoria over walking your other daughter down the aisle. I'm choosing to help the daughter who needs me most. Victoria specifically asked for that week, and I already bought the tickets. I can't disappoint her now. He picked up the pocket watch again, this time looking at the engraving with what might have been regret. Maybe Christopher's father could walk you down the aisle instead. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. Christopher's father, who barely knew me, who would be doing it as a favor to his son rather than as a celebration of his own relationship with me. The casual way my father offered up this substitute, as if fathers were interchangeable, was perhaps the cruelest part of all. The drive home passed in a blur of familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, staring at my house, the one Christopher and I had bought together, the one where I'd planned our future, the one where I'd imagined telling him tonight about my father's excitement to walk me down the aisle. Instead, I had to figure out how to tell my fiancé that my father had chosen a vacation with my sister over the most important day of my life. The front door closed behind me with a soft click, but the sound echoed in my chest like a gunshot. Christopher looked up from his laptop at the kitchen table, his face immediately shifting from casual greeting to concern when he saw my expression. How did it go? he asked, already knowing from my face that it hadn't gone well. I set my purse down carefully, buying myself a moment before the words had to come out. He said no. The simple statement hung in the air between us, but it carried the weight of 31 years of disappointment. Christopher closed his laptop and reached for my hand. What reason did he give? Victoria needs him more. They're going to Hawaii that week. I heard my own voice, flat and emotionless, like I was reading someone else's news. He already bought the tickets. As I said it, the memories started flooding back with painful clarity. This wasn't new. This was the story of my entire life, playing out one more time on the biggest stage yet. I was 7 when it started becoming clear. My birthday party, the one I'd planned for weeks, invited all my friends to, circled on the calendar in red marker, got canceled because Victoria had a dance recital the same day. Not even a competition, just a regular recital. But Victoria was nervous, and she needed Dad there for support, and we couldn't possibly split up for one day. Your friends will understand, Mom had said, already making calls to cancel. Victoria's been practicing so hard. I'd understood even then. I'd always understood. That was my role in the family, the understanding one, the flexible one, the one who could handle disappointment. High school graduation came and went with Dad checking his phone through the entire ceremony, fielding calls from Victoria, who was having roommate drama at college. He missed my valedictorian speech because he'd stepped outside to talk her through some crisis that I can't even remember now. You're so smart, Mason, he'd said afterward, patting my shoulder absently. You'll figure everything out. You always do. College was where the financial disparity became impossible to ignore. Victoria got a full ride to her dream school tuition, room, board, even spending money. When she changed majors 3 times and needed an extra year, Dad just wrote another check. She's finding herself, he'd explain to anyone who questioned it. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs to pay for state school, took out loans for books, ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to count. When I asked for help with just 1 semester's tuition, Dad had looked at me with genuine surprise. But you're doing fine on your own, Mason. Look how responsible you've become. Victoria needs more guidance. The pattern was so consistent it became background noise. Victoria's needs were urgent, emotional, requiring immediate attention. Mine were practical, manageable, something I could handle myself. Victoria got the family vacations, the emergency visits, the dropped-everything phone calls. I got the "we're proud of you" text sent 3 days after major life events. When I got my first promotion at work, Dad's response was a brief "congratulations," followed immediately by a story about Victoria's new boyfriend and how worried he was about her choices. When Victoria got fired from her 3rd job in 2 years, it was a family crisis requiring intervention, strategy sessions, and Dad's connections to help her find something new. She's more sensitive than you are, Mom would say, as if sensitivity was a limited resource and I'd somehow used up my allotment by being born first. The engagement had been no different. Christopher and I had driven to their house to share the news, both of us nervous and excited. Dad had shaken Christopher's hand, said the right words, but within 10 minutes he was back to discussing Victoria's divorce proceedings and how much emotional support she needed. At least you found someone stable, he'd said to me, as if my happiness was primarily valuable for how little maintenance it would require from him. Sitting in my kitchen now, watching Christopher process this latest chapter in the same old story, I felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. Not just hurt, but anger. Clean, clear anger at the unfairness of it all. You know what the worst part is? I said, my voice gaining strength. He suggested that your father could walk me down the aisle instead, like fathers are interchangeable. Like it doesn't matter that it's supposed to be him. Christopher's jaw tightened. He actually said that. He said I don't really need him, that I turned out fine without much help from him, so why start now? The words tasted bitter coming out of my mouth, but saying them out loud made something click into place. He's right about one thing: I did turn out fine, but not because I didn't need him. Because I learned to stop expecting him to show up. The realization hit me like a physical force. I'd spent 3 decades making excuses for him, understanding his position, being the reasonable daughter who didn't make waves. I'd been so busy being easy to love that I'd forgotten to demand to be loved at all. Mason, Christopher said quietly, you know this isn't about you not being worthy of his attention, right? This is about him. I looked at my fiancé, this man who'd never once made me feel like I was asking for too much, who celebrated my successes without comparing them to anyone else's needs, who'd been planning our wedding with the same excitement I felt, and realized that I'd been accepting crumbs from my father while this man offered me a feast. I know, I said, and for the first time I actually meant it. I think I'm finally starting to understand the difference. The idea came to me at 3 in the morning, jolting me awake with such clarity that I sat up in bed, startling Christopher. What if I showed him? I whispered into the darkness. What if I made him see what he's been doing all these years? Christopher rolled over, instantly alert despite the hour. What do you mean? A video, not angry or vindictive, just honest. All those moments, all those choices, laid out so he can see the pattern. My heart was racing, but not with anxiety this time, with purpose. By morning, I'd called my friend Olivia, a freelance videographer who'd helped with several of my corporate events. She arrived at my house that afternoon with her equipment and a gentle understanding in her eyes that told me she'd been through something similar. "Tell me what you want to say," she said, setting up her camera in my living room. I'd spent the morning going through old photos, home videos, anything that could illustrate the story I needed to tell. The evidence was overwhelming once I started looking for it. Birthday parties where Victoria was the center of attention even when it wasn't her birthday. Family photos where Dad's arm was around Victoria while I stood slightly apart. Christmas mornings where her pile of presents dwarfed mine, not because of cost but because of thought, attention, care. I want him to see what I've seen, I said, settling into the chair across from Olivia's camera. I want him to understand that I've been watching, remembering, hoping things would change. The red light blinked on, and I began to speak. Dad, I know you're probably surprised to get this video. I've been thinking about our conversation in your office, about the wedding, about Hawaii, about Victoria needing you more than I do. And I realized that I've never actually told you how all of this has felt from my perspective. I talked for 20 minutes, weaving together memories with the photos and videos I'd collected. Not with anger, but with the kind of calm honesty that comes from finally accepting a truth you've been avoiding. I talked about the birthday party, the graduation, the college funding, the engagement announcement. I talked about learning to celebrate my own achievements alone, about becoming self-sufficient not by choice but by necessity. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, I said to the camera, imagining his face as he watched. I'm telling you because I love you, and I think you love me too, but somehow we've gotten lost in this pattern where loving me means expecting less from me, where being capable means being disposable. When I finished, Olivia and I spent another hour editing the footage, adding the photos and old video clips that illustrated each point. The final product was 15 minutes long, a lifetime of feeling secondary, condensed into a quarter-hour of quiet truth-telling. I uploaded it to a private YouTube link and sent it to both my parents with a simple message. I thought you might want to understand why your decision about the wedding hurts so much. I love you both. Mom called within an hour, her voice thick with tears. Mason, honey, I had no idea. I mean, I knew things weren't always fair, but seeing it all laid out like that, she trailed off, and I could hear her crying softly. Mom, I'm not trying to destroy the family. I just needed you both to see what I've been living with. Your father watched it too, she said. He's very quiet right now. I think he's processing. Dad's call came that evening. His voice was different, smaller somehow, less certain than I'd ever heard it. Mason, I watched your video. And I don't know what to say. I never realized it looked like that from your side. He paused, and I could hear him breathing heavily. I thought I was just helping where help was needed most. I thought you were strong enough to handle being independent. I am strong enough, Dad. But that doesn't mean I didn't want to be chosen sometimes. It doesn't mean I didn't need you. The wedding, he said quietly. I can cancel Hawaii. I can tell Victoria no, I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Don't cancel because you feel guilty. Don't come to my wedding because you watched a video that made you feel bad. Come because you want to be there. Come because you choose to be there. The silence stretched between us, and I realized I was holding my breath. I do want to be there, he said finally. I've always wanted to be there. I convinced myself that you didn't need me to be. I've always needed you to be there, Dad. I just got really good at pretending I didn't. We talked for another hour, carefully navigating this new territory of honesty between us. It wasn't a magic fix. 31 years of patterns don't disappear overnight, but it was a beginning. A crack in the wall we'd built between us, letting in just enough light to see the possibility of something different. When I hung up, Christopher was waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of tea and a question in his eyes. He's going to think about it, I said, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Really think about it, not just react to it. How do you feel? I considered the question, surprised by the answer that came. Peaceful. For the first time in years, I feel like I told the truth about something that mattered. Whatever happens next, at least there are no more secrets about how I feel. The next morning, Mom called to tell me they'd scheduled a family meeting for the weekend. All four of us, sitting down together to talk through what the video had brought up. It was a conversation 31 years in the making, and I was finally ready to have it. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matched the nervous energy thrumming through my chest as Christopher and I drove to my parents' house. The family meeting had been Mom's idea, but I could hear Dad's lawyer training in the formal way she'd phrased the invitation. A discussion about family dynamics and moving forward constructively. We gathered in the living room where I'd opened Christmas presents as a child, where I'd announced my college acceptance, where I'd shown them my engagement ring. But this time felt different. The usual seating arrangement, Dad in his recliner, Mom on the couch, me in the chair by the window, suddenly seemed symbolic of all the distance we'd maintained over the years. "I've been thinking about your video all week," Dad began, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I've been trying to understand how I got so many things wrong." Before I could respond, the front door opened and Victoria walked in, shaking rain from her coat. I hadn't known she was coming, and from the surprise on my parents' faces, neither had they. "Sorry I'm late," she said, then stopped when she saw all of us sitting there in formal arrangement. "What's going on? Mom said there was some kind of family meeting." The silence stretched uncomfortably until Dad cleared his throat. "Victoria, we were discussing some concerns Mason raised about family dynamics, about the wedding situation." Victoria's face shifted through several expressions before settling on something that looked like understanding mixed with guilt. "You mean about Hawaii? About Dad choosing my trip over walking you down the aisle?" I nodded, bracing myself for the defensive reaction I'd come to expect whenever Victoria's privileges were questioned. Instead, she sat down heavily on the couch next to Mom. "I've been thinking about that too, actually. About how that must have felt for you." "Victoria," Dad started, but she held up her hand. "No, Dad, let me say this. I watched Mason's video. Mom sent me the link." She looked directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before: genuine remorse. "I never realized how much space I was taking up, how much of your attention I was demanding." "You were going through a difficult time," Dad said automatically, falling into his usual pattern of protecting Victoria from criticism. "I've been going through a difficult time for 10 years, Dad," Victoria said quietly. "And every time something good happened to Mason, I somehow managed to have a crisis that needed immediate attention. Even I can see the pattern now." The admission hung in the air like a confession. I felt Christopher's hand find mine, steadying me as this conversation took a turn I'd never anticipated. "The thing is," Victoria continued, "I don't actually need to go to Hawaii that specific week. I requested it because I didn't want to sit through another family event where I felt like the failure compared to Mason's success. I was being selfish." Mom's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Victoria, honey, no, Mom, I was. I've been the problem child for so long that I forgot how to not be the center of attention, even when it was someone else's turn." She looked at me again. "I'm sorry, Mason. I'm sorry for all of it, but especially for this. For trying to take away your wedding day because I was too insecure to watch you be happy." I felt tears starting, but they weren't the bitter tears I'd been carrying all week. These were something else entirely: relief, maybe, or hope. "I want to change the Hawaii dates," Victoria said to Dad. "I want you to walk Mason down the aisle. I want to be there to watch it happen." Dad's face went through its own series of transformations: surprise, relief, something that might have been pride in Victoria for the first time in years for the right reasons. "Are you sure?" he asked her. "I know you were looking forward to the trip." "I was looking forward to having you to myself," Victoria said honestly. "But I think I've had you to myself enough for one lifetime. It's Mason's turn." The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had as a family. Real messy, honest in ways that made us all uncomfortable but also strangely lighter. Dad acknowledged the favoritism, not with excuses but with genuine remorse. Mom admitted to enabling the dynamic because it was easier than confronting it. Victoria talked about feeling pressured to be the needy one because it was the only way she knew how to get attention. And I talked about learning to disappear, about making myself so low maintenance that I'd forgotten how to ask for what I needed. "I want to walk you down the aisle," Dad said as the afternoon wound down. "Not because I feel guilty, but because I'm proud of you, because I want to be part of celebrating the woman you've become despite my failures as your father." "You weren't a failure, Dad. You were just distracted." "I was a failure in the ways that mattered most," he said firmly. "But I'd like the chance to do better, starting with your wedding day." The rehearsal dinner was 2 weeks later, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had my father's full attention. He listened when I talked about my work, asked thoughtful questions about my relationship with Christopher, and when Victoria started to monopolize the conversation out of habit, he gently redirected it back to me. "Tomorrow," he said as the evening wound down, "I get to walk my daughter down the aisle." I've been looking forward to it for weeks. It was such a simple statement, but it carried the weight of everything that had changed between us. Not fixed that would take time and continued effort, but changed. Shifted towards something that felt more like the relationship I'd always hoped we could have. As Christopher and I drove home that night, I realized that the knot of anxiety I'd carried in my chest for months was finally loosening. Tomorrow, my father would be there. Not because he had to be, not because he felt guilty, but because he'd chosen to be. Because he'd finally learned to choose me.